Hi everyone, this is going to be a continuation in our virgin birth series, and then up front I want to make it clear that I don't believe that normally any of us have to believe in the Davidic lineage of Jesus through Joseph to be saved. If you accept Jesus Christ and you follow him, it's not going to make any difference. But if you want to convince a Jewish person that they need to accept Jesus as their Messiah, you would never convince them in a million years unless you could prove that he fulfilled 2 Samuel, which he had to have a father in the lineage of David. And the only person in view, obviously, is Joseph. But the evidence is stacking up very clearly that our Bibles were changed after the 100s, the late 100s, and it still existed in the time of Justin Martyr. And I'm going to show you. Deo was correct that I was relying upon someone who made a statement that was misleading, that Justin Martyr says Joseph begat Jesus in his dialogue of Trypho. He doesn't. He's correct. Deo's correct. But Deo, you didn't mean to do this, but by forcing me to dig, I found now 4 more even legitimate sources, and they're all in the Bible texts, not in some third party's commentary. Different Bible texts. And I'm going to jump to that so we can see where this is all going. That unintentionally, Theo, you've undermined what you were trying to do, which is to throw doubt on the the Davidic lineage of David, and now you've made it even more clear that it did originally always said Joseph begat Jesus. And I'm going to just jump to that very, very much impactful evidence first, and then we'll come back and we'll review the how I came to that statement that was incorrect, that Joseph begat Jesus was in the dialogue with Trypho. Okay, so in my investigation to find out what had happened with this reference to Trypho and all of that, and what was the evidence, it led me to this article by T. Allen Hoban, The Virgin Birth, The American Journal of Theology, July 1902, Volume 6, July 1902, pages 473 to 476. It's free online at the University of Chicago Press at this URL. And I'm just going to show you real quick what it is. It's 35 pages long, and this is what he goes through in great detail about the virgin birth and the latest evidence that had arisen. This work is written, when did I say? 1902. So this is right after Agnes Lewis and other sources had actually uncovered the earliest text in the hundreds. And the reason you can know they're the earliest texts is they have a variant that only exists in the early church, which is that Joseph begat Jesus. After that became overwhelmingly erased and suppressed, and then you end up with the virgin birth accounts we have today, beginning around 200s forward. All right, so I've taken the T. Hoban article out and I put it in my OneNote so I can easily show you things simultaneously. So at page 474 of the article I mentioned to you, he's going to say the following. In connection with Matthew 1, verse 16, it should be brought to notice that although all the Greek uncials and nearly all the minuscules have Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is also called the Christ. And I'm going to pause there. So what's significant, that if you were a scholar, you would know immediately the uncials are not early documents, but late documents. So uncial is a majuscule script written entirely in capital letters, commonly used from the 4th to the 8th centuries AD by Latin and Greek scribes. Okay, so that's how we know that what he's saying is the later church, the 4th to 8th century church, transforms and has this version that says Joseph is the husband of Mary, who was born Jesus, who was called the Christ, of whom was born Jesus. It does not say that Joseph begat Jesus. It changed to Jesus was of Mary instead of was begotten by Joseph. So anyway, then he's going to contrast that later practice, that later belief, with works that are obviously much earlier, and that's the Curetonian Syriac, which has been dated into between the 100s and the middle 200s, the Armenian, 2 Greek minuscules, 346 and 556, and most of the old Latin versions have Joseph, to whom the Virgin Mary was betrothed, begat Jesus, who is called Christ, while the Sinaitic Syriac, that's Agnes Lewis's version we've been talking about, and Joseph, to whom the Virgin Mary was betrothed, begat Jesus Christ. The reading of the MS recently discovered Oxyrhynchus agrees with the Greek uncials. So you have a different text where whatever it is, nobody knows much. It's just a simple scrap of paper. Anyway, so what we end up with is really we have, thanks to Deo's commentary, that I would go look this up more significantly. We now know here. I did not realize the Curetone Syriac had the same language. I thought it did not, and so now we have proof that it did. So now we have another text, and that I believe dates also. It's a little later than Agnes's Lewis's, but it is same time period, late 100s, early 200s, same period, because of this very text we're reading. These variants about Joseph begat Jesus. Then there's the Armenian Bible. There's two Greek minuscules, 346 and 556, and most old Latin versions. So that means there's many versions of the Bible of Matthew that have this. Many. You see the word most. In fact, what does he say? Does he say most? I want to make sure. Yeah, most. That's his words. I should put that in quotes so we can see it. Most of the old. I'm going to put it all in quotes. Of the Latin versions. So there's numerous. Look how many sources we have, ladies and gentlemen. And then he, for whatever reason, he divides these two things up into two groups. These four groups say Joseph, to whom Mary was betrothed, begat Jesus, who was called the Christ. And you're going to see he's thinking, because it says the Christ, that's significantly different from over here, because it says instead of saying called the Christ, it's begat Jesus Christ. So then he puts in a fifth category, the Sinaitic Syriac, or the Syriac Sinaiticus, as I've been calling it. That is Agnes Lewis's discovery in the 1840s, published in her 1880, 1894, and 1896 editions of her work called the Syriac Sinaiticus Palimpsest. So it's not even it's not even five sources. It's literally, you have two over here and you have many others over here in the most of all the old Latin. So you have at least 1, 2, 3 texts, Curetonian, Armenian, and Sinaitic Syriac. Then you have two Greek minuscules of 346 and 556. So that's like, now we're up to 5. And then you have most old Latin versions. Let's say there's 5. So you got like 10 early texts from the early church, let's say, that if you have 5 old Latin versions that all talk at Matthew at that point where it says Joseph begat Jesus. And that means Jesus, if a Jewish person came to you and said, how do you know? You can say, hey, the overwhelming evidence is in the earliest church, the earliest Bibles all had Joseph begat Jesus. For some reason, somebody came along and tried corrupting our Bible, probably an attack on us by the Marcionites is the theory. That's my theory. And they were pro Paul Christians, and they wanted to destroy our Jesus. And basically they believed that there was an ascended Jesus talking only to Paul, and that's who we need to follow instead of the Jesus of this earth, who didn't really know anything, and he's going to serve with Yahweh in Sheol. And I think a Jewish person will go, so you guys were the people who were fighting to bring in the virgin birth account, had all these, wanted to do all this stuff to you guys, very anti God, anti Yahweh. Yes. Yes, pro Paul. So that's where this virgin birth stuff comes from. The Marcionites, I believe, are the ones who damaged our Bible texts. But I digress. Anyway, well, whoever it was, it could have just been an interloper, somebody who's, I'm going to do a translation from Hebrew into Greek of the Hebrew Matthew, and I'm going to make a mistake about Isaiah 7:14. I know it says young maiden, but I'm going to say young virgin, and then I'm going to make a story that will fit that account, and then I'm going to contaminate their Bible, but it's a good story. Maybe it'll make it more popular. And it did. It actually worked, because Gentiles are dumb. We don't know you need a Davidic Messiah. If you do not have that, you have no Christ. So this was actually a fundamental switch. And what's so ironic, as we go into this episode, you're going to see that even to this day, scholarship is backwards. They're calling the people heretics who were contending that Jesus had a Davidic Messiahship instead of having a virgin birth. This virgin birth has now become in Orthodoxy more important than Jesus having a Davidic lineage. And let me just tell you something. I want to make this very clear. There is no way Jesus is the Messiah if he does not have a Davidic lineage. So how can it be heretical to insist that Jesus was begotten by Joseph? It cannot be heretical. That's the only thing that makes him legitimate. The only thing that is heresy is claiming the virgin birth. Do you see how things have topsy-turvy? But we're going to go into it, and you're going to see the craziness that goes on here, even in this article. So anyway, but I digress. Let's go back, and now I want to go over what Deo had said, and give him a pat on the back and thank him for iron sharpens iron. So I want to give him a thank you and a shout out for that. All right. So the other critique that Deo made was about my statement that the dialogue with Trypho said Joseph begat Jesus. And he cites correctly 3347 in the video. This is what it says. He then went to the Ante-Nicene Fathers. It doesn't say that. So he says it appears that that is not correct. So he did it correctly right by the book. And I thank him very much. But now we will see that is actually I don't want to say I'm not blameless. I should have probably said, you know what? Let me verify the citations that this Mr. Rice is saying to verify that these two sources are the correct sources. And so I should have done that. And now I have, and I found they're not correct. And we'll take a look at what he said. And maybe I also might have misunderstood him as well. Okay, so the book I relied upon was Shaken Creeds, The Virgin Birth Doctrine, a study of its origin by Jocelyn Rise. Actually, I guess it's a female. London, 1922. And this is what she says. Justin Martyr, remember, he's the person who's born 100 and dies in 165 AD by estimations. Justin, in the middle of the 2nd century, and other early fathers of the Catholic Church continually referred to those Christians who deny the doctrine of the virgin birth, who believe that Jesus was a man and not a God, who use versions of Matthew which state that, quote, Joseph begat Jesus, and repudiate the virgin birth story as an afterthought of the gospel editors. So I am understanding what she is saying is Justin says that he's dealing with sources he know that say in the version of Matthew that Joseph begat Jesus. So now I'm wondering where is that coming from? So if you read the next paragraph, two sources are mentioned. In connection with the genealogies given by Matthew and Luke, it is worth noting that Justin Martyr, who wrote, apparently in ignorance of our canonical Gospels in the middle of the 2nd century, also gives a pedigree of Jesus, but traces it through Mary and not through Joseph, and thus makes his genealogy compatible with the story of the virgin birth, which, however, he relates differently from both stories in our Gospels. And there's footnote 2. When you go to footnote 2, it's dialogue with Trypho, first apology. So these are the two sources. I assumed what this meant was he said Matthew said Joseph begat Jesus, and then in these two sources, he's then trying to claim no, Mary is the actual source of Jesus's birth, and she's a Davidic heir, which, by the way, doesn't count even if she were, but she isn't. She's of the tribe of Levi. We know. Okay, and we know Mary is a Levite due to the circumstances revealed in the Gospel of Luke about Mary's sister and her husband is a Levite priest. And I won't go into all that detail, but that's why we know she's not of the Davidic lineage. Even if somebody wants to make a claim, she is. It's never proven. And the whole point of both Luke and Matthew is to prove the lineage is from Joseph. I mean, that's obvious. It's telling you this is the lineage of Joseph. And A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so it's all the line of Joseph, not of Mary. We don't know her line. It's never stated. So it's just an absurdity when people try to claim that. And so anyway, so that's why I went that way. It says right here, dialogue with Trypho, first apology. These are the corrections Justin Martyr is allegedly offering to the people who claim that the virgin birth is untrue, and that it was given that the Davidic line runs through Joseph. Okay, so anyway, that's why I made that mistake. I misread this. Well, I read it, though I thought it was what he was saying. All right, so now I just want to go into a little more depth about what I did find out. I mentioned in the prior episode that Deo was correct, that the first apology, according to earlychristianwritings.com, did not have Joseph begot Jesus, so he was correct about that. So my reading again of Rise saying that it was in there was misreading her. And then the next thing I wanted to research is, well, is it in the first apology? Excuse me, not first apology, in the dialogue of Trypho. So that led me to this article, and this is a groundbreaking revelation, breaking all barriers of the argument that was even the argument of Deo that the evidence was too flimsy. It was just Agnes Lewis. Well, now we not only have Agnes Lewis, we're going to have a whole flood. So Deo, it backfired on what you wanted to do or say, but I hope you believe in truth, and you're going to learn the truth today. So this is a University of Chicago article. It was introduced as Matthew and the Virgin Birth by B.W. Bacon in 1911. So I went in there and I clicked this button, and there we go. And this is what he says. So what he mentions right off the bat is an accurate account of the new readings in Matthew 1:16. So this is 1911. This is after Agnes Lewis' book and the Curitan Sinaiticus and the Syriac Sinaiticus. These are the two oldest Bibles, both having this story of Joseph begat Jesus, as we'll get into. So here's what he says. Here we have placed before us the reading of the Syriac Sinaiticus, that's Agnes Lewis's, in Matthew 1, verse 16 to 25 as follows. 1:16, quote, Joseph begat Jesus, verse 121. And what he's doing here, he's showing you that it wasn't just one little line in Agnes Lewis. The fact that Joseph was the father is repeatedly referenced in how many other verses? 116, 121, 125. Okay, at least three, but there's actually more. But he's just giving you a synopsis, a cursory review. 116, Joseph begat Jesus. 121, she shall bear to thee a son. 125, and she bore to him, Joseph, a son. And then number 2, the second reading is from the dialogue of Timothy and Aquila, edited by Conybeare in Anecdotus Oxonoresia. We had this in the last one, 1898, which Conybeare maintains to have been the basis of all existing readings. So basically, he's saying this is where it all comes from, is the Joseph begat Jesus is where it originally is, how the Bible originally read. It's obvious it read that way, because why else would you have the lineages of Joseph in both Matthew and Luke? So the dialogue reading is as follows. Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called the Christ, and Joseph begat Jesus, who is called Christ. You'll find that right here in this footnote 2, and then it goes on. Schmeidel, reviewing both forms, regards both 1 and 2 as composites. Syriac Sinaiticus, number 1, as he points out, contains only surviving traces, now quite overlaid by the canonical form of the text of a reading which critical theology had long insisted on as the original. So what he's saying here is that you can now see that there's an underlying text that Joseph is the father of Jesus, yet there's some orthodoxy that is changing, but it won't completely want to get rid of what was there before. It's just slightly adjusting it to mention, make Mary more prominent in the statement. It doesn't simply just say Joseph begat Jesus. It has the other things in between, and eventually, gradually, it's going to erase Joseph as even having any role. So that's why you can see that the history is going from a Davidic birth to a virgin birth. Okay. And but he's then saying, Schmeidel is saying that the tradition has been that the true Orthodox original was always a virgin birth, which we now can see very clearly that can't be possible. And he's going to tell you why right here. What's staring you in the face? What is the proof? The only reading consistent with the non-virgin birth account, the Davidic lineage, is the only reading consistent with the employment of Joseph's genealogy, the simple form, and Joseph begat Jesus. So it makes no sense to have anybody but Joseph be the father of Jesus at the end, because why are you doing the genealogy of Joseph to begin with? So it's so obviously a corruption. I mean, it's like it's staring us in the face, ladies and gentlemen, staring us in the face. There's no reason to do the lineage of Joseph and then end one person short. You're trying to convince us that Jesus has a Davidic lineage, and then you go one person short. It doesn't make any sense, and it has to make sense. Anyway, let's continue. But just as in the Syriac Sinaiticus, that's Agnes Lewis's, the one we've told you about before, the two mutually inconsistent representations, A, of a birth of Jesus by physical descent through Joseph from the royal line of David, B, of a miraculous conception of the womb of the Mary the Virgin, are fused together by conflation, and that's important. So inside of the Syriac Sinaiticus, there's this clear statement that Joseph is the father of Jesus, but then there's this clear statement that there's the Virgin Mary. Well, now she should be a virgin if she's getting married, right? Typically, that's the way it's done in those days, of course. So that would be normal. But it didn't mean that the conception was virginal, and that's the whole point, that Joseph begat Jesus. So that's but if you wanted to fuse the transition together in one passage, you would just add the word virgin in front of Mary, and it sounds like you're somewhere heading in that direction, but you haven't gone there yet. Although in the very ancient version, the inharmonious parts still remain imperfectly adjusted to one another. So in the relatively late dialogue of Timothy and Aquila, a similar edition of the opposites has been appeared. Oh, there's a page missing, by the way. That's yeah. Wait, let me just see here. Yeah, there was a page missing. See, page 83 to 86, there's no page. So I can't know. I've written off to the journal and said I need this page. But anyway, so I'm sure the point was we've covered dialogue of Timothy and Aquila in this episode earlier, and we saw that it is Joseph begat Jesus. So these opposites are fused, are not even present in Timothy and Aquila. It just simply says Joseph begat Jesus. Okay, and so then to bring us back to what I was talking about earlier, the Hoban article, we provided that to you earlier. This is from 1902, and this is fantastic. So we went from thinking all we had was two books, the Trypho and the two books I referenced to Deo. They turned out to be Rice was giving me a misdirection. Great, because that meant Deo said, "Push harder, Doug. You didn't prove those two." It turned out we have much more proof than we even knew about. Thank you so much, Deo. Look at this, the Curetonian Syriac. So we're going to have to go back there and check that out. The Armenian Bible, we're going to have to check that out. The two Greek minuscules, 346 and 556. That's our next episode. We're going to look at the most old Latin versions have it. Joseph begat Jesus. Now we've got a treasure trove, and then of course we always had the Sinaitic Syriac. Joseph to whom Mary was betrothed begat Jesus Christ. And so, just so you know, the Mr. Conybeare, I shouldn't say that, Conybeare, he was the professor of New Testament at Oxford, and he said because of these facts that it had Joseph begat Jesus, that points that these are the first, excuse me, the 100s and the 200s is where these documents should be dated. Other people who didn't like what he's finding and is mentioning about the Joseph begat Jesus stuff, and you can imagine this is considered almost heresy to most people that Jesus doesn't have a virgin birth. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Again, it can only succeed. That idea can only succeed because we are dumb Gentiles and we do not know that Jesus cannot be Messiah if he doesn't have a Davidic father. We are dumb, dumb, dumb. And that's why we fell for this for almost 2 millennium. And somebody, I believe, was trying to corrupt our faith, and was trying to make fun of us, if you ask me, make us look like fools to the Jewish people. So that would create this alienation. Look at all these dumb Gentiles. They don't even know that Jesus has, they believe he's the Christ, he's the Messiah, and they don't even know the most basic thing. He has to have the prophecy of Samuel says it has to be of the seed of David. Right? Even Paul says it has to be the seed of David. Peter in Acts 2 says Jesus is the seed of David. I mean, the apostles and even Paul knew that Jesus had to be the seed of David. And if you don't have that, you don't have a Christ. And yet we're the dumbest Gentiles. The Jewish people are just laughing at us that we're such fools that we could follow a Christ who is got a virgin birth. Unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. Just really, we are really been sucked into a big corruption. And that's what I think bothers people is they're like, oh my gosh, how could our faith be corrupted like that? Let me just put it this way. It's unexcused. How can I put it this way? It doesn't matter if you don't like it. It doesn't matter if you wish it were true, the virgin birth were true. It doesn't matter that it's embarrassing. What's really is embarrassing is trying to maintain with a straight face that Jesus could be the Messiah, and you know he can't be when you now have been educated and you should be able to read the Bible about 2 Samuel, and where is the proof that Jesus is the Messiah? What does it require? It requires what is in Matthew chapter 1, as it originally read, as it's read in all these multiple sources, the Curetonian, the Armenian, the two minuscules, 346 and 556, most of all the Old Latin, and the Joseph to whom Mary was betrothed, as well as we saw last time, the dialogue between, I think it's Titus and Aquila. So there you go. And that's a Justin Martyr work. So you have abundant proof that you can use with a Jewish friend, even if you don't care about the virgin birth. And you, like I said, you could disbelieve it. You're not going to go to hell for that, right? You could believe in the virgin birth. You're not going to go to hell for that. Not at all, right? But your Jewish friend may never find Christ unless you say, you know what, I've heard there's some real credible evidence that actually it didn't read the way it reads now. And Joseph, it did say Joseph begat Jesus. You could at least just point the people at this and they'll go, you know what? I like this Jesus, and if this is exonerating him, and I can accept him now, maybe I should do it. And maybe some people will turn their hearts over to Jesus Christ. Even if you believe in the virgin birth, you could at least help them find Christ by looking at evidence that doesn't agree with your own personal view. Wouldn't that would be a really brave and a good thing to do, and a smart thing to do because it's actually the truth. Don't you want to follow what's more likely true and help people rather than hold on to this some precious dream and myth that your forefathers were given two millennia ago, and we're just too dumb to know that it's not possible that Jesus could be the Messiah if he doesn't have a Davidic lineage? So anyway, that's my message. Thank you, Deo. Thank you, Deo, very much. God has used you in a really wonderful way to show. Look at this list, Deo. Look at what you have helped me to expose to all the people who are watching. I want to repeat it again. The Curiatone Syriac, the Armenian Bible, the two Greek minuscules, 346, 556. The most old Latin versions have this thing. Joseph begat Jesus. And then finally, the coup de grace, the Sinaitic Syriac, which is Agnes Lewis's work, Joseph, to whom Mary was betrothed, begat Jesus Christ. Boom. That's how it originally read. It's overwhelmingly obvious. All right. God bless everybody. Hope that educates you and will lead you to be able to lead a Jewish person to salvation, even if you yourself don't want to accept anything but the virgin birth. You can do that. You just have to have some knowledge of the argument of why you can help a Jewish person accept Jesus was the Messiah. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know or believe even that what I'm telling you is the absolute truth. And you want to still believe the King James Bible is like the Bible from heaven, was given by inspiration of God. Well, but you know that it will help a Jewish person to understand the evidence that there is a Davidic lineage. That's all you need to know. So I pray you will help other people when you come into those situations. God bless everybody. Take care. Ciao. Bye.